while I'm on the subject of bikes, I figured I'd make a video on this guy. So I wanted to get into fat biking over the winter. Near Regina, so they do have some pretty cool trails around Wascana. But if you've looked at fat bikes, you know they're pretty expensive. So they go right around that $2,000 mark usually. But this is kind of an off-brand Chinese one. You're going to see at lots of the wholesales. So like I think the brand name is Deviant if you Google it. Anyway, so it is a fat bike. I'll give them that. For the money, it's about $300 Canadian, and I would say it's actually pretty good. So you got to taper your expectations. Obviously, you're not getting Trek Farley, which I did do a back-to-back comparison on, which was pretty cool. And this bike held up surprisingly well, especially if you're using it for winter riding and trails. So it looks kind of funny here because I've got the back wheel off it, but we'll get to that. So I've actually put a lot of kilometers on this, or on trails over winter, and I only had one failure so far, minus this. But during the winter riding, so really the failure that I had over the winter was just the seat post. It does have the cheaper style, so it's the one where the bolt goes through and it clamps it. And I'm 250 pounds. And when I ramped off a snowbank and came down very hard on the rear end, I bent the seat straight up. Now, could that have been assembly error by me? Maybe not getting the tabs kind of in the right spot? Could have for sure. But also it could just be the more modern design where it's we'll call it a vertical clamp. So since I put that on though, no issues with that. This was like about a $12 fix. And again, you just got to taper your expectations for winter riding in that. This thing has been great. 26x4 tires on it, and they look pretty cheap. I was really skeptical. I was like, wow, I'm going to throw these out right away. They're tubed. But they're surprisingly really good. So when you touch them, they do kind of come across as a harder plastic. But again, I did a back-to-back on a Trek Farley 5 with the Bontrager tires on it, and this thing out-climbed it by far. Same tread, like both pretty new tires. He was down a little bit actually on PSI because they were tubeless. So this thing, it just grabbed the ice and the snow a lot better. Unfortunately, couldn't get down the PSI that I probably would have liked to, but I found the Farley 5 to be a really bouncy ride when I did that versus this was just very planted as well. A bit shorter of a wheelbase than the Trek Farley, and the 26-inch tires, which I really like. I felt like the 27.5s really put you high up in the air. And for really tight trails, it was a lot harder to maneuver the Farley. So I was really rooting for the Farley to win and have an excuse to go buy one, but this thing beat it in a few ways that I was very surprised. So for $300, you're actually getting a lot. When you look at wheel sets for a fat bike, even like a good used wheel set's probably going to set you back about that $300. So especially fat biking in the winter is kind of something you want two people to do. So probably what I'm going to do is get a better one and keep this as one that somebody else can take out with me, just because it's too cheap to, why not? But surprisingly, pretty well built. Steel frame, the welds all look good on it. That was another thing. I was ready to get out my welder and gusset some things and do what I had to do, but worked good. It's got a cheaper Shimano drivetrain on it, but I've had no issues with it. Again, I was going to convert it to like a 1x drivetrain, but the stock gearing is almost perfect, I would say, especially for when you're doing winter trails and you're really going slow. I found maybe I could have used half a gear lower. Would have been nice, but I took it out trail riding the other day and the gearing was perfect for that. So yeah, I was really happy with how it stood up. The brakes, I found I did eat through pads quite quick. I was adjusting those quite a bit. And I feel like the brakes are adequate, but if you were gonna upgrade something too, I would throw like a cheap set of Amazon hydraulic brakes on this. I feel like that would be a good upgrade. Did look at doing a fork on the front, like again, trying maybe some cheaper parts just to see what I like, because fat bike forks are really expensive, about $1,000, and they don't come up used very much. So this guy does have a tapered head tube, steel fork. The Farley had a carbon, as well as quick release axles with dropouts. So Farley was through axles and a carbon fork, but the weight, you could feel it when you lifted it onto the truck. But other than that, when you were riding them, it was very, very similar, especially with how high you felt like you were up on the Farley. The ride on this was actually really good. Grips, again, I was ready to throw these out because I was like, ah, they're so ugly, and put on some nice like Bontrager ones or P&W like the Farley had. And these are so damn comfortable. I rode these for 2 hours in the park one night, and their ergo grips, they're just fine. They're really good. I really couldn't complain. The seat, I was gonna throw that in the garbage, and it's the most comfortable seat I own. Even compared to like my $100 gel ergonomic, like, I don't know why, if it's just, I've had to sit on the floor upside down while I was working on, but just a regular foam seat. And man, for 2 hours of trail riding, you'd never know it. It was just fine. So external cable routing, which I like. If you're gonna change parts, do it that way. But I will get to the failure that I did have. So had my mountain bike apart, so I took this to the trails the other day instead, and it worked really good for the first hour and a half. I was taking it on some beginner trails, just some nice downhill stuff. And then I got a little cocky. I was like, man, this thing's working good. So I took it up some intermediate trails and killed it almost immediately. So I came down a very steep descent, and you really land into a pocket and turn. And I landed way too hard on the bike, tail low, and ended up bending the axle and breaking the, this one has a free hub on it. So it's cheaper design, where this thread's on. It doesn't have like the removable cassette that would slip on and then get retained. So that is one of the cost-cutting ways that they did. And really, with the bearings being offset on those, you probably can't see it very well on the camera, but that axle is pretty bent. It's not that it's a crappy axle or anything. I did straighten it a little bit in the hydraulic press, and it was really hard to straighten. So I believe that axle is hardened. Pretty good quality. It's just you're not going to beat the design. Probably if you're under 200 pounds and you're not throwing it down intermediate mountain bike trails, you wouldn't have had this issue, but for me, I did. So rather than, the nice thing about this stuff is really cheap to replace. I could get a stronger axle and a different free hub, maybe with like one lower gear, but I think what I'm gonna do is actually get a different hub and just relace it with a free hub so that I can just change my cassette and kind of eliminate that weak point. Don't want to spend a ton of money on it, obviously, because it's a $300 bike. Kind of defeats the purpose of it. Like if you start throwing hundreds of dollars of parts on it, well, you could have just went and got one. That was probably a bit nicer. So, but that's about where I'm at on that. So overall, actually really happy with the bike. If you're on the fence and you just want to try out fat biking without spending, you know, over $1,000, I'd highly recommend it. Go pick yourself up a new one of these, change out that seat post, or if you're like under 200 pounds, don't worry, you're probably gonna have a fine time with this bike. It came with a lot of extra stuff like fenders, kickstand. I didn't put any of that on. The kickstand was already on, but again, the Farley didn't have a kickstand, which kind of sucks. So I don't think on a fat bike is where you're really gonna find weight savings in a few grams like a kickstand. But value proposition, you really can't beat it. So never thought I'd say it, but I do recommend this bike, even though it has had some parts failures. So there we go.